Hi, everyone. Welcome on. We're just going to hold some space for a little bit for folks to Zoom in. It's nice to see you all here gathered today. Feel free to use the chat to let us know what your favorite go-to dish is when you go to large gatherings. And it could be for any occasion. Just what are you bringing? Are you the chips and salsa person? Are you the cookies? I'm the beverage gal. Let's see. Homemade guac, yes. Charcuterie, oh yes. Salad of any kind, hummus. Ooh, seasonal jello. Brownies. Okay, so corner brownie or inside brownie? This is the big debate, right? Deviled eggs, cheesy potatoes. Absolutely fan favorite. Corner brownie. Thank you, Kay. Yes, great. Oh no, we have an inside brownie. It's a war. Thank you all. We're so grateful to have you here. If you're just joining us, feel free to use the chat to mention what your go-to dish is for when you go to large gatherings. Someone says crock pot, stuff, raw veggies, cookies. Fantastic. Welcome. Well, while you're doing that, we'll go ahead and get started with today's webinar. My name is Brittany Saunier. I'm the Executive Director of the Partnership for Food Safety Education. And today's webinar is focused on supporting food safety practices during large gatherings because it is that time of year where we're having folks get together in large groups for a variety of reasons. And so there are many important food safety steps to follow. And so we're going to focus on that today. And here I am again. So a little bit about how we'll run the show today. We'll have our welcome and housekeeping, which is what we're doing right now. We'll hear from Sharon Davis with the Home Baking Association. And then we'll hear from Meredith Carruthers with USDA. And then our very own Katie Weston to share some resources to follow up on some other unique features of large gatherings. Feel free to use the chat to connect with folks here today. You can also send a question during today's webinar. We'll do our best to monitor questions. We'll have time for Q&A toward the end, which is where we'll address most of the questions there. After the webinar, you'll receive a brief survey, so please complete that. It helps us continue to provide quality programming and understand the gaps and needs of in food safety education. We are able to offer some continuing education units today through ANFP. There will be certificates entering the chat box throughout this webinar, and we'll also provide that information in a follow-up email. And then once the webinar is over, this will be up on our website as a free resource and recorded webinar where you can also access information there as well. So many ways to get it. Don't fret. And if you're new to the partnership, a little bit about us. The Partnership for Food Safety Education is a public-private partnership. We have an active network of about 13,000 health and food safety educators, professionals like yourselves here today. We partner with about 40 organizations representing industry, consumer groups, scientific associations, as well as our federal liaison partners at the CDC, FDA, and USDA. And we do this all collaboratively in the name of preventing foodborne illness. So thank you for being here and continuing your education. Because as you know, it's very important. About 1 in 6 people, according to the CDC, will experience foodborne illness a year. Unfortunately, one too many will die from eating contaminated food, about 3,000 a year. So safe food handling practices are really important to reducing that risk of illness. And we'll have some actionable steps today to help you help people in your communities to reduce their risk of illness. Also wanted to take a moment to let you know that we are hosting a conference. So if you enjoy these webinar and educational events, you can join us for the Consumer Food Safety Education Conference. It's in March 13th through 14th in Houston, Texas. And it's essentially a great opportunity to network with other individuals like yourselves, to resource share, and to continue your education in food safety education efforts. And we do have an early bird special happening, so make sure you get that great rate before the end of the year. And we try to keep things really reasonable for you to be able to attend. Oh, and so we have our first poll question. We're just curious. We want to know if you're planning to join the conference. I know in the past, Sharon, you've had some engagement at the conference. I think we'll have that poll pop up here.
That's
Meredith.
a great conference. Great conference, Brittany.
Thank you, Sharon. And Meredith, I know you have a couple of sessions as well coming up. So we do our best to bring content just like this. Maybe not sure. Oh, I'm already trying to read the results to you all. And it's not let's see. We'll leave it up for about 2 more seconds here. All right. Share results. So good chunk of you not sure yet. I know March feels so far away, doesn't it? But it's right around the corner. Don't have the budget. That's a big factor for sure right now. And there are a few of you that are already registered. So thank you so much for that. If you change your mind, you're welcome to join us, and we hope to see you there. And thank you for those already planning to join us. So let's see here. Moving on, it is my pleasure to introduce Sharon Davis with the Home Baking Association to share with you a little bit about baking at this time of year in large gatherings. Sharon?
Thank you, Brittany. It's just my pleasure to be with you all. So we've all baked for ourselves and our families, and then when the big crowds arrive, we love to do it. And let's go ahead to the first slide. The reasons we love to do it have everything to do with showing people we love them. That's the basic research we've done for over 25 years or more, climbing now, that it's just the reason why people bake. There are added benefits besides just serving up that beautiful galette or that lovely brownie that everybody's talking about, deciding who gets the corner and the interior piece. But part of it is also that kitchen time together where you're sharing conversation, you're sharing good food, you're passing on traditions. And then, of course, what's better than that home-baked product? All the commercial companies are all wanting to be like home-baked, it seems like. So producing that fresh from the oven bread or pastry, cookies, cakes, savories is always delightful in many ways because of the aroma, the flavor, and the freshness. But then there's also that temptation that's gone throughout the ages here in the US, and that is who gets to lick the spoon, who gets to lick the bowl or the beaters. How about pinching a bit of that dough when nobody's looking? So what we're here today to talk about is that's one thing that maybe isn't a way to show people we love them. Let's go on to the next slide. We have some myths that we have to dispel, and one of them is that if there's no raw eggs in a batter or a dough, then we're fine. Licking the bowl is just okay. Why not? And the reason we want to make sure is clear today is that flour is a raw ingredient, just like eggs or any other raw ingredient that hasn't yet been cooked or baked. It's grown in the field. It's harvested in nature, and it's exposed to all the elements before it ever goes to the mill. Next slide, please. So we have wheat flour. It's lovely and clean, and it goes through a tremendous set of standards when it's milled from wheat from the field to the flour. There is no question but what purity is sought, but it doesn't ever go through a kill step in the flour mill. So as a crop being grown in the fields and harvested, there's still that chance that animals or birds or other other pathogens can be introduced to the wheat while it's out in the field and ready to be harvested. So next slide, please. Those pathogens that are most commonly identified are Salmonella or E. coli. So we don't ever bake to make another person sick. And so therefore we have to draw some lines, even if it's doesn't seem very sociable. And one of them is the raw dough idea. We want to go ahead and mix and share, and maybe all share the chance to help with the stirring, like my grandson Liam's here doing with my daughter Katie. All of that's good stuff. But when it comes to that chance to eat the raw dough, we have to be the spoiler maybe and say no. Next slide, please. Baking to serve a whole crowd, or if you start with one person and you're serving it, there's some key core four that apply that Fight Back's been offering ever since I started teaching, I think. And those core four are clean, separate, cook or bake, and chill. And those apply to baking. Sometimes that's forgotten. We think about it in regards to meats or crossing with vegetables or fruits as raw ingredients that we're serving in salads. But in truth, we have to go through those same steps when we do baking. We wash our hands not just at the beginning, but the truth is we identify where to wash them after we've stirred raw batter. We separate to avoid cross-contamination. So when we're working with the raw flour, the raw eggs, we don't want those to cross over into areas where we're prepping salads or crudités or a charcuterie board. Then we bake all the batter in dough before we eat it. Again, spoiler alert, but it's the bottom line. We're just not going to share that raw batter or dough. And we use a good scraper or a spoon to get it out of the bowl and into the cupcake cups or the muffins or into the loaf so that, they're baked. We just know they're all in there. We wash our hands and surfaces after we prepare the batter and dough. And that's a step that oh gosh, I think it took me a while to really get that grooved into my life. And in a minute, we'll talk about one way to make it grooved a little better. But once you fix the batter and the dough, you want to clean the surfaces and clean your hands and everything else too. If you're making a refrigerator dough batter, or if you're making a dough and batter and you're not going to bake it in the next 2 hours, you don't, unless it's a yeast dough, you don't leave it sitting on the countertop. You're going to place the finished baked good in the refrigerator, or the unfinished baked good in the refrigerator and hold it. Or in cases of things like scones or biscuits or other types of products, you can actually chill or freeze those for later baking. And that can make for a really good fresh out of the oven thing when people arrive at your house. Washing hands to serve, well, yeah, we want to be sure they're thoroughly clean, but even if you can glove up, tie your hair back, all those things if you have long hair, to follow the way to keep hair out of your product, hands off the baked and finished goods. That's a great way to go. Next slide, please. So we basically ascertained this throughout the industry that flour is not ready to eat. The traditional milling does not include a process that will eliminate the presence of pathogens. And these peer-reviewed studies can be stacked up, but here's just one that you might access if you'd like. But I know the CDC, the USDA, Food Safety Information Services, as well as our extension services, all have done some of these research projects, as well as the North American Millers Association. Next slide, please. The consumer's perception, though, doesn't follow that. And that means that those who are sitting around your table or coming together, they're still going to feel like flour is safe to eat before baking. 44% really just feel that way. That this kind of an emotional thing. And so it may surprise them if you are adamant that flour is a raw ingredient and you don't want people to be sampling the dough batter while they're prepping it. We found that more millennials and Generation Z than boomers or Gen X engage in this risky behavior. Most don't understand those risks. Why more do? When my generation, yes, I'm a boomer, well, we did a lot of dough sampling back in my youth. And the truth is that we didn't really identify it as risky behavior to the degree we have now. So why would millennials and Gen Z find that something they would engage in? Because it tastes good, because it gives them a sense of warmth. And some people are just risk takers. Their interest is in baking, but maybe not so much in food safety. And of course, that's where you all come in. Next slide, please. The labels and the consumers we meet don't always match up either. So you're baking in your kitchen, maybe your flour is in a cool container. There's no label there. The label on the flour bag is the only place that really says this. Flour is raw. Please cook fully before enjoying. And I always quibble a little bit with the word cook because ultimately most of us bake flour. And so maybe that's another disconnect people have. Next slide, please. I want to show you the next one too. The other disconnect that we have is the placement of the warnings. So in one case, it may be on the top, it's small print. On the other, it might be on the side, way at the bottom. So sometimes we don't see the safe handling instructions. And of course, there's always that tendency to say, I want to ignore them because I really, really like cookie dough. So in that case, you know it if your flour is stored in a separate container, as it should be, not in the bag. It means that that label is not kept. So a piece of that label probably should be kept. So you have it with the product that's in the storage container. Even if the warning isn't taped to the top of your storage container, you want to keep the stock number from that flour. Next slide, please. Those persistent misconceptions that are out there that probably drive me nuts for sure, and everybody else, is that one I mentioned to begin with, there's no eggs in the dough, therefore I can eat the raw dough. Then we move on into the area of where how people right now are consistently wanting to make their own edible cookie dough. And so you may be saying to yourself, oh, I think, wouldn't it be cool to offer a cookie dough bar at my my next gathering? And unfortunately, there is no way to prepare flour so that you can use it raw in your cookie dough at home. You cannot microwave or home oven heat it to an acceptable check. You don't know really what you've done in that flour because you can't check it just based on a temperature you take off of a cookie sheet or out of a microwave. That is not going to necessarily kill all the bacteria. So commercially sold products that contain raw dough, like cookie dough, they use a specific commercially treated flour to reduce those pathogens. Next slide, please. We've looked, I mean, this is as current as Friday of last week. I've asked again, is there anything that's shifted in the retail flour, family flour area? And it's just not possible to microwave or oven heat treat your flour to an acceptable level. And that hasn't shifted, even though the roar on the internet is still out there that if I just put that in the microwave and it's in a microwave safe dish and I heat it, it's going to be okay. Or if I put it in the oven on a cookie sheet for 5 minutes and heat it to 375, I'm fine. Please don't pass that on as the next thing that we can do because it just simply won't hold water. Next slide, please. So that saying no to raw dough is principle when you're prepping, and then also just the idea that we can heat treat the flour ourselves and then it will be okay. Or the second one that I just would suggest again, to leave that cookie dough concept of a dessert bar to the pros. They will buy the flour that's already been treated. Next slide. The commercial ready-to-eat flours, there is one flour mill that I'm highlighting here called Ardent, and they have offered a product called Safeguard ready-to-eat flour. It's a proprietary method. It doesn't mean that other flour mills haven't been working on this. Kansas State University's been working on research to figure out, could we temper the wheat after we harvest it, and then we'd have a kill step there. They keep working on the research, but nothing has actually what I'd call sifted down to the home flour product. You cannot buy a home flour product that has been safely treated to use in a cookie dough. So again, that's a commercial process for ready-to-eat flours. Next slide, please. The 5 steps then, these infographics or info pieces are all available on our website or also on NAMA, North American Millers Association. But again, those steps are just to recognize flour as minimally processed. It can carry pathogens. You need to wash your hands before and after handling it. And you need to work with clean workstations and utensils. You want to not eat raw dough or batter, and then to cook or bake everything to a safe temperature. And that's what I'd like to talk about next, temperatures. So within a recipe, I love this cooking resource or baking resource that Safe Recipes Guide gives to us teachers in the classroom. What I do is I provide the recipe to a student group, and they will go through with me, and we will identify the steps that we need to take to be food safe. And you'll see these are already identified in the hot chocolate cookies. We keep this recipe on our website, homebaking.org, as well. Because we know that if we write in the steps into that recipe, we will then be much more likely to do the steps if they're there, along with the mixing instructions. So again, that's what a safe recipe style guide is all about. Next recipe, please, or next slide, please. Heat and time are the other piece of it. So we provide on our website baking temperatures. It's a complete fact sheet or infographic. You can download it. It looks like this in total, and it covers process temperatures that help you to bake quality products, and then doneness temperatures. And you will see them there on the right side. So taking the mystery out of what you're doing in food safety is all about taking temps. So I love digital thermometers. We have a member who ThermoWorks, who offers great guidance on their website as well. But taking those internal temperatures is akin to what you're going to do with your turkey or what you're going to do with your other baked products. And it takes the guesswork out of whether or not it has reached the kill step or the doneness step that you need for any cake, pie, cheesecake, etc. Just think about banana bread. That's where I start, is that, a lot of times you think it looks done and you're just wondering what's it like at the middle. You can't consume that banana bread or that banana muffin if the middle is doughy or raw. So using a digital thermometer to take that at center of the muffin pan, you take the center muffin, you take the temp at the middle. Same way with the loaf of bread, take the temp at the middle. Don't just guess, and maybe don't just use a toothpick. Go ahead and get the temp, and you'll see that if it's 205, it's done, and you're ready to cool them on a rack and cool them down for consumption. Next step, please, or next slide, please. Reliable resources are essential, and some of the research I've mentioned here comes from Kansas State University's website. Karen Blakesley's a good friend, and she's provided some great guidance. The community large group food safety that's taught there by Linda Beach is a nice asset for you to go to as well. Flour and food safety continues to be researched and discussed by some of our leading extension professionals. Here are just 3 that I'm listing for you to go ahead and read their blogs or their posts about the lack of food safety in home treatment of flour at this point in time. Next slide, please. The 2-hour rule applies with baked perishables too. So you're baking a pumpkin pie at home. You need to bake it within its time frame. You need to take a temp on the center, and then you need to respect the 2-hour rule that we use with any perishable product. When we buy a ready-made pumpkin pie in the grocery store and we see them stored at room temperature, it's because they have been commercially prepared using an entirely different set of ingredients than what we're going to use at home. Well, not different pumpkin, but different processing of those ingredients. So once we have chilled that or cooled that product down on a cooling rack, we would be ready to put it in the fridge before the 2-hour window is up. And that could be anything from a galette that's got cheese or cream cheeses or other ingredients included in them as well. I mentioned earlier refrigerating or freezing raw batter and dough, and it's a great way to go because you can bake things off fresh from the freezer. My scones that's how I do them. I cut them in small sample bites. I can freeze them raw, then I can bake them right from the freezer, and I have hot mini scones ready to go. No sense leaving that batter out at room temperature, especially if there are eggs and raw flour in it, just to sit there until you're ready to bake it off. If you're reheating, let's say you've chilled something down just to its chilled state at 40 degrees and then you want to bring it back up to temp, just respect the timing of that. You don't want a low and slow oven. You want a nice hot oven, like 350, or in some products, I will use up to 450. If it's something like a galette or a pastry crust where I just want it crisped up and at temperature in the middle, I use a hot oven. And then you take the center temp again to be sure that it's reheated to the 165, 170 degrees at center. And then again, you need to consume it within 2 hours, or you'll have to get it back into the refrigerator or on a holding cart that will keep it at the minimum food safe temperature that it needs to be. And that would be anything from pastries, tarts, galettes, rolls, crepes, any of these that can be filled with perishable fillings. Next slide, please. Sometimes we wonder, well, what about this product? Do I need to refrigerate it or not? And I do want to highlight a couple pieces of that. Some things are best kept at room temperature. Literally, if they're refrigerated, they stale, they get too firm or crumbly. And those products include things like yeast breads or rolls, breadsticks, pretzels. These we do not refrigerate. We keep them at room, or after 2 days, you should be freezing them and then reheating them because they'll taste better, they'll be fresher. So the rule of thumb there is if I baked it today and I'm going to serve it tomorrow and it's one of these on this list, I should be able to keep it at room temperature. If it's going to go 2 days, it has the potential to stale at room temperature, or even occasionally you'll find a bread in a moist and humid environment that will actually mold within 2 days. But that I'm going to say is more likely to be in the southeast where it's hotter and more humid. Fruit pies can stay on counter. Tarts, crostadas, galettes can if they're fruit. But if they've used things like zucchini and cheeses and other fillings, then you need to keep them refrigerated. On the right side, you see anything there, once it's been baked and cooled to 100 degrees or cooler at room temperature, then it needs to be refrigerated from there on out until you're going to serve it. It can't stand for more than 2 hours. If it's pulled from the oven and served within 2 hours, you're good to go. Next slide, please. I invite questions that you may have about baking and flour food safety and who's most at risk and what strategies you think are most effective. When you're sharing that food safety messaging, especially about not eating raw dough or batters. And when you're serving a crowd, how do you encourage hand washing? That's one I would love to know about, because when you have a buffet line and 50 guests coming through it, you can provide the tongs and the serving tools, but how do you help your crowd come to the table with clean hands? And then what resources would you find most helpful for us to provide you within your work? We know at homebaking.org, we have a visual section, like I mentioned, of baking temperatures, and we have guide cards to help you. We have an entire section on baking food safety. Visit us at homebaking.org for that. But I'm all ears now from you.
Thank you, Sharon. And we are getting quite a few questions in the Q&A. Um, I think before we, go to Meredith and then to the formal Q&A section, one question that came up quite a bit was around the difference between coconut flour and almond flour, and if these same precautions exist.
Okay, that's a very good question. Both are raised in an entirely different environment, but all three are raised outdoors. All right. This is the key to that. So, flour is never just flour. Every flour performs differently, but that's not the question here, is it? It's about food safety. So if the flour is produced in a food processor, you have roasted almonds and you produce the flour in a food processor, I can't guarantee that there hasn't been a contamination step, but it hasn't been, if it's been toasted in the oven and reaches 165 degrees in the oven, toasting the almonds, and then you produce the flour, you're probably pretty certain that there's not going to be a food safety issue because the product hasn't been outside and it has had a kill step. Does that make sense? My personal knowledge about coconut flour is pretty slim. I know they're going to harvest and process that coconut. I don't know if it ever has a toasting step or a kill step. I can do some homework on that. But again, that's the difference between wheat flour and any other flour. Did it go through a kill step? Baking is the kill step. Okay. Does that help?
Yes, thank you, Sharon. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to dig deeper too, for maybe a
Yeah.
future topic. And flour, it's just like how we think about proteins that are raw. This is a raw ingredient, and baking is just like cooking. So I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us, and
Thank
uh,
you.
we'll hear more in the Q&A.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And then her email's here as well. I see if you wish to engage further. So up next, oh, I'm sorry, Sharon, you had a few more slides.
Only just the millers and the agricultural groups behind the Home Baking Association are all listed on our website, and it's important that you know who is behind our message. We're a nonprofit, and we work together to support you as food educators. So don't hesitate to go to our website and go to members, and you'll see all of our partners, our associate members, and our members. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we're coming up on our next poll question here. A little lighter. What are some of your cooking fails that you've experienced? And usually around this time of year, which are set around holidays, but it could be specific to any large group gathering. Let's see. So we'll leave that open for a little bit here. I'm not a good measurer of ingredients. I don't follow recipes very well. So mine would probably be the key ingredient one, forgetting that because I just toss stuff in. So let us know. Okay, we'll wait for a few more seconds here. Okay, let's see. What do we have? Oh, sorry. So we forgot that's the big winner, forgetting a key ingredient. Let's see, leftovers out overnight. Yeah, that's always a bummer when you forget to put them away and then you're looking forward to them the next day and you can't eat them. Lots of cooking pros here, so congratulations. Thank you all for doing that. We thought we would just break it up just a little bit here. So up next, we'll hear from Meredith Carruthers, Public Affairs Specialist with the USDA, and talking about more of the protein specific scenarios.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me today, Partnership. I am going to, talk about some holiday considerations for meat and poultry products and just other foods as well. I've noticed during the presentation that Sharon was giving that it seemed like my Zoom was a little glitchy. So Brittany pop in at any point to tell me if I need to turn my video off or something like that to help save bandwidth, but
Sounds good.
I'll get started. Okay, so next slide, please. So Thanksgiving is only 2 weeks away, and I don't know if anybody else is like me, but cannot believe that it's mid-November and Thanksgiving is so close already. But I'm going to focus a lot of today's presentation on Thanksgiving, just because it's what's coming up next, and it's the biggest food holiday, I would say, for especially meat and poultry during the year. So my presentation focuses mostly on Thanksgiving, but the concepts apply to all of the holiday season after Thanksgiving, you know, all of the holidays that come up in the winter. And if you're preparing a large meal like turkey, or if you're doing ham or even beef roasts, the concepts for thawing and cooking and everything that we're going to go over in the 2-hour rule all still apply. So just keep that in mind as I go through. But holiday food safety risks. Holidays bring us all together. People are getting together with large groups of people. They're making large meals that they're not used to preparing all throughout the year. A turkey is a really large piece of food. So just dealing with it being big and bulky. So really just the large quantities of food that are being prepared is one big way that there's a risk for holiday season. Foods that are left out in the danger zone for too long. So I know that my family likes to sit and chat for a long time after we've served the food. So foods that get left in the danger zone and get left out for way too long are another big risk throughout the holiday season in food gatherings. Yeah. And then undercooking of meat and poultry is another really, really big thing that we see with holiday timeframes and foods at large gatherings. It's, you know, we're all under pressure to meet a certain time frame. We're trying to get the turkey out on the table because all the sides are already ready. And so it might seem easy to cut corners and skip using a food thermometer to make sure food's cooked to a safe internal temperature, but very important to still use a food thermometer and not move too quickly. We can go to the next slide. So we'll go over the core 4 that I know the partnership advertises and that we talk through a lot in our materials as well, but they are clean, separate, cook, and chill. These are the 4 basic food safety steps that are easy to follow in your home at any time of year, but especially during holidays. So clean is starting with clean hands, utensils, and surfaces, and making sure that you're washing them throughout food preparation as well. Especially important after you're handling raw turkey or any other raw meat and poultry products before you move on to preparing any side dishes or other foods that may not be cooked. And then especially making sure you're cleaning and sanitizing your surfaces after they've, you know, touched raw turkey, and getting the sinks, the countertops, things like that cleaned and sanitized as well. Separate is keeping your raw meat and poultry separate from cooked foods or other foods that will not be cooked later in the process. So keeping your raw turkey separate from those foods, like I just mentioned. Cook, always cooking your food to a safe internal temperature as measured with a food thermometer. This is especially important to make sure that bacteria are killed before you consume any foods, and especially with a turkey. And then lastly is chill. So keeping perishable foods at a safe temperature below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, following the 2-hour rule, which means not leaving perishable foods out for longer than 2 hours after they've been cooked. If you live in a particularly warm place in the country that might be over 90 degrees Fahrenheit on these holidays, then that time frame is reduced to 1 hour. And then using leftovers within 4 days and freezing them if you don't plan to use them. So we're gonna dig in to a little bit more detail with some of these items and other food prep. So we can go to the next slide. Thawing a turkey. So again, this is specifically for thawing a turkey, but the concepts of safe thawing can be applied to any large meat or poultry products or just any frozen foods in general. So we have 3 safe ways to thaw foods, and they are refrigerator thawing, cold water thawing, or in the microwave. Thawing a frozen turkey or other foods on the counter is not the safest option to do, and we very highly recommend against it. If you have time to plan ahead, refrigerator is going to be your best bet for thawing. It ensures that the turkey stays at a safe temperature the entire time that it's being thawed. It's in the refrigerator. There's no risk there for it having any of that temperature exposure where it can be unsafe. So putting it in the refrigerator, allowing about 24 hours for every 4 to 5 pounds of turkey for it to thaw, putting it into something like a dish to catch any juices that may leak out from a hole in the turkey bag or something like that. And that's going to be your safest bet. Now, we've all had situations where we realize, oh no, I forgot to take the turkey out of the freezer, or I forgot to take XYZ out of the freezer and I need to make this like tomorrow. So in that instance, the cold water method is probably your next best bet. It's a lot faster than the refrigerator, still not instant, so we got to keep that in mind, but it'll take a shorter amount of time than refrigerator thawing will. So you would keep your turkey fully wrapped, or keep your food wrapped in something that helps protect it from the water touching it, if you can, and put it in submerged in cold water. So this can be cold water from the tap, that's fine. And then you submerge it. And then we recommend changing the water every 30 minutes until the turkey is thawed. That helps it continue to thaw, because the frozen turkey is going to make that water that it's sitting in really, really cold. Eventually it's just going to be acting as the refrigerator, where it's not going to thaw as quickly. So changing the water every 30 minutes ensures that it's continuing to thaw at a safe rate and at a quick rate that is helpful for everyone. And one note that we have for turkey thawing in the cold water method is that it should be fully cooked after you've thawed using this method. The last safe thawing method is microwave thawing. Not very many turkeys are going to fit in a microwave. It's probably going to need to be a really small turkey, like under 12 pounds, or a turkey breast or something, for it to be applicable for microwave thawing, but we've included it just in case. And then, like I said, there's other food products too that you can use the microwave to thaw. But use your defrost or your thaw setting on your microwave. Go ahead and put it in there and follow any manufacturer's instructions that you need to. And after that type of thawing, fully cook it right after. You don't want to put it back in the fridge to cook tomorrow or anything like that. So cook it immediately in there. And then if you're really in a bind, you can cook a turkey from frozen. So those are your thawing methods. We can go to the next slide. That is not the image that I had on my slide. So I'm not quite sure what that says, but that's fine. I'll share some information anyways. So cross-contamination, as the slide says, is the transfer of bacteria from food to other places and other foods and things. And this can be particularly risky and harmful if you're not sure where bacteria has transferred to, and you go to eat something, and that's a potential way to get you sick because you might not have known that it was there. So as mentioned, turkeys are pretty large and bulky, and they provide a lot of opportunities for that bacteria from the raw turkey juices to spread around your kitchen. As you're unwrapping the turkey, oftentimes it'll be over the sink or over a trash can or something like that, but those juices are ultimately leaving the packaging and potentially dripping as you're lifting the turkey into a pan or something like that. When you're thawing the turkey, as I mentioned, if there's little holes in the packaging, it can leak those juices out into places like your refrigerator. So good to put them in a dish or something to catch those. And then if you're moving the turkey from your unwrapping station, like I just mentioned, or putting it into the pan and you bump up against something, there's a lot of different places that the turkey juices can find their way into the kitchen. So as you're preparing and after you've prepared, it's really important to properly clean and sanitize any areas that might have come into contact with the raw juices. You'll want to use warm soapy water to wash utensils, cutting boards, and surfaces, air dry or wipe them clean with single-use paper towels, and then use a homemade or commercial sanitizer or disinfectant to fully kill the germs after that. So that's a two-step process for cleaning and sanitizing. Warm soapy water, sanitizer after that. Another thing that kind of comes along with the reducing cross-contamination, and that is an important note here, is that washing your turkey is a sure way to spread bacteria. It's risky. There's a lot going on in the kitchen, so it's safest not to rinse raw turkey. This goes along with the conversation of rinsing raw poultry in general. But if you do choose to wash or rinse your raw turkey, and again, you're going to be unwrapping it in places like the sink and whatnot anyways. So the big note here is just to make sure you're fully cleaning and sanitizing those areas to make sure that they are safe for continuing food prep. And one of the reasons it's very important, and that we know that this goes unnoticed or untreated sometimes, is because of our study where we found 30% of consumers did not successfully clean and sanitize their kitchen surfaces around meal preparation after preparing raw poultry. So it's a note that we continue to touch on. For the entirety of turkey prep as well, make sure you're paying attention to your high touch areas like spice containers, refrigerator and cabinet handles, utensils, countertops, cell phones, and fully clean and sanitize those touch points. Again, a lot's going on in Thanksgiving and large holiday meal prep. So as you're moving around the kitchen, pay attention to what you've touched and where your hands are going, and make sure you take care of those after. Next slide, please. So cooking and stuffing a turkey. Common cooking methods for turkeys are things like roasting in the oven. There's even electric roasters that you can put on your countertop, deep fat frying, grilling, smoking a turkey. But no matter how you're cooking your turkey, it's very important to make sure it reaches a full safe internal temperature. When it comes to stuffing a turkey, similar to the recommendation for washing or rinsing, it's safest not to do it just because of the risk of cross-contamination. It takes longer to cook. It might cook unevenly. So for those considerations, it's safer not to, and to make sure that it's being cooked separate and then your turkey is cooking on its own. But if stuffing a bird is important to you and your family, and it is something that you choose to do not stuff the turkey the night before. Stuff it right before you cook it, and then make sure that in addition to the turkey, the stuffing has also reached a safe internal temperature of 165 degrees. And it's safest to take that temperature in the middle of the stuffing because that's what's going to cook the last. And then we have our helpful graphic up here for roasting in the oven and how long it'll take if it's stuffed or unstuffed. And we have a lot of other good resources for this Thanksgiving in terms of visuals. And I forgot to mention on the thawing slide, but I will mention it here. We have a new Thanksgiving landing page that has the thawing and cooking calculators on there. So you can put in how much your turkey weighs, what method you're going to use to cook or to thaw the turkey, and it'll spit out how long it should take to thaw or cook. But I'll touch on that a little bit more later. An exciting little mention. Next page or slide. Using a food thermometer. This is one of the biggest things that we can recommend for this holiday season, especially for something like a whole turkey. Even if you're cooking a ham, a roast, any kind of meat that you're using, we really recommend using a food thermometer. It's important because as these meat and poultry items are larger, they cook more unevenly. There's different portions that might be done before other portions of the meat and poultry. So important to use a food thermometer to make sure it's fully reached a safe internal temperature. It's killed all the bacteria before you dig in. And a whole turkey is interesting. So most times you can take the internal temperature in the largest part of the food. So if you have a large beef roast or something like that, stick the thermometer into the thickest part, usually through the center and whatnot, and it should be fine in that one place. If it's really big or if it's really uneven in places, take the temperature in multiple places. And the turkey is interesting and whole poultry in general, because we need to take the temperature in 3 places. So to make sure you're getting all parts of the turkey fully cooked to a safe internal temperature, you'll want to check the internal temperature in the innermost part of the thigh, the innermost part of the wing, and then the thickest part of the breast. Turkeys that have pop-up timers, the pop-up timers are pretty accurate. So there's not a huge concern with the pop-up timer accuracy itself. It's just that it only is taking the temperature in that one spot that it's placed in. So we still would recommend using a food thermometer to take the temperature in those other places mentioned. Next slide. These are the safe internal temperatures for a variety of meat and poultry products. So no matter what you're cooking this holiday season, we have easy access here. We have the regular versions of these magnets available to order as a free resource. So if you have consumers in your realm that would like a free magnet, they can email us at fsis.outreach@usda.gov. Or if you need any for any programs that you're running, we have the regular version of the magnet. So this is a Thanksgiving holiday themed version that we did for promotion. And safe internal temperatures here. But if you need the regular version, we can help you out with magnets. Next slide, please. I think that if any of us are backfighters and we do work in the realm of food safety, we've heard of the danger zone and the 2-hour rule, but the danger zone is the temperature range between 40 degrees and 140 degrees, where bacteria can multiply rapidly, especially foodborne illness causing bacteria that can multiply to dangerous levels and create things like heat resistant toxins that won't be killed by cooking later on. So when food is left in the danger zone for 2 hours at room, in the danger zone for 2 hours at room temperature, bacteria can double quite frequently, or can double in about 20 minutes. So very important to be following a 2-hour rule, or 1 hour if it's above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, because the bacterial multiplication at that time frame, especially when something like Thanksgiving or a holiday event where food is sitting out for so long, food can very quickly become unsafe. And because there's no way to tell if it's unsafe after that time frame, if bacteria has reached a dangerous level, we then advise people to discard any food that's been left out longer than that. So for something as enjoyable as the holidays, especially where leftovers are really exciting for people, it's very important to be following a 2-hour rule, setting a timer for yourself, advising, your family or friends or whoever you're with to set timers, remind each other to put food away, and follow these concepts in the 2-hour rule. Next slide. So continuing with the 2-hour rule, when serving food to groups, 2-hour rule is really important. As I mentioned, food sat out for more than 2 hours can be unsafe. When you're serving food and at something like a holiday gathering, if you would like to avoid the 2-hour rule, you can keep hot foods hot above 140 degrees Fahrenheit and cold foods cold below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So what that's doing then is keeping that food outside of the danger zone and eliminating that concern or that risk where it's in that range of temperatures where the bacteria can multiply. So hot foods can be kept hot in things like warming trays or chafing dishes, slow cookers, things that are, a preheated oven, things that are going to keep it above that 140 degree temperature. Cold foods can be served in trays or bowls or platters nestled on top of ice. So that way the ice is helping keep it cold. Important to remember to replace the ice as it melts. And then another option is that food can be divided into small portions and served a portion at a time, keeping the remainder in the refrigerator. So instead of putting out the entire tray of deviled eggs for Thanksgiving, you can put out 5 or 6, and then as they are finished, replenish and put out more. Next slide. Everyone's favorite, leftovers. So leftovers are arguably one of the best parts of Thanksgiving. I know me and my family fight over the leftovers and who gets to take them home each year. So for leftovers, including appetizers, side dishes, turkey, any perishable food that you have served, if it's within 2 hours, or again, 1 hour if it's above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, break down leftovers into smaller portions for quick and safe cooling. So if they've been within 2 hours, it's safe to keep the leftovers. If it's been more than 2 hours, they unfortunately need to be discarded. But as you're packing up your leftovers, especially if you're packing them up fairly quickly after cooking or after serving, it's important to break those bigger portions into smaller portions so that way they cool safely and quickly. If you put big portions, like a big tray of mashed potatoes, into the fridge while it's still hot, it will eventually cool, but it might take a little too long for it to cool. It might be in that danger zone for too long. So it's important to break it into smaller portions so that way it cools a little bit quicker at a safe rate. And then if you're freezing leftovers, make sure you're considering if you want to freeze them now or later. Foods will be a better quality the faster that you freeze them. So if you know that you have too many leftovers to consume in 4 days, which is the recommended time frame to use or freeze leftovers in, within, if you feel like you're going to want to have too many leftovers to consume in 4 days, go ahead and freeze them right away. But regardless, if you've hit that 4 days and you want to freeze your leftovers, pop them in the freezer, wrap them well in airtight wrapping. That way it helps keep the quality better for longer. And you can use them within 2 to 6 months for best quality. They'll stay safe forever, but better quality. All right, next slide, please. Here's a shout out for our meat and poultry hotline. So the meat and poultry hotline is a consumer facing hotline that answers food safety questions for consumers in the home. We have phone, email, and live chat options, and we're open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern time. We are open on Thanksgiving Day. So our team is fully geared up, ready for turkey questions galore, and ready to help people with their Thanksgiving planning. We get day of Thanksgiving emergencies and turkeys that are need to be condemned because they've done something unsafe. And whatnot. So we're open on Thanksgiving Day, which is a really exciting day for our team and really exciting that we have that available for consumers. So pass this along. If you yourself have questions, please feel free to contact us, or if you want to pass it to any of your constituents or people that you serve, we absolutely would love to chat with anybody that calls or, reaches out to us with turkey questions. So yay for the hotline. And then last slide is about our Thanksgiving resources. We, like I mentioned, launched a Thanksgiving webpage that has information and resources on how to safely prepare Thanksgiving foods and turkey. It has thawing and cooking calculators, and you can see a preview of the thawing calculator here. You choose what method you're thawing with and how much your turkey weighs, and it'll tell you exactly how long it's estimated that it'll take for it to thaw in the refrigerator. There's also an entire library of fact sheets about preparing turkey safely in English and Spanish, and we have videos and graphics available there that show how to prepare turkey. So it's a really great page that our team worked hard on and has a lot of resources for Thanksgiving housed nicely all in one place. So please go take a look at it, promote it if you're interested, or direct any other consumers to there. It should hopefully be a really great resource for Thanksgiving this year. And that is everything from me. Is there any questions I can help answer while I'm on?
Thank you, Meredith. We are coming to time pretty close here. So for those of you who need to, if you're able to stay, and Meredith, Sharon, hopefully you are as well. I didn't have a chance to chat you. For Q&A, please do. If not, we are recording this webinar, and so you can catch the last bits if you have to jump to something else. But Meredith, wonderful tools. I love that people can order magnets. You guys are so good at that. The calculator, how helpful. Congratulations, such a great tool. So thank you. I think we'll go ahead and we'll move along to our next presenter, Katie Weston, who will share some resources to supplement some of the things that we've learned, and then hopefully go into a Q&A after. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Brittany. I will move kind of quickly so we can have time. I saw there were lots of great questions, but I shared this in the chat. We are sending the slides out after the webinar, and they'll go up on the website, so you'll be able to go back and look for these resources. Sharon and Meredith gave lots of great information. So what I'm trying to do here is give you some of our resources that could be helpful if you want to talk to people about how to prepare food safely for large gatherings. So both Sharon and Meredith mentioned the core 4. It's so important. And of course, it's a great place to start. It's a good framework to talk about people's food safety, including when you're having large gatherings. There's certain things in each category that you could talk about. What are the risk points? Lots of people, lots more hands. You want to make sure they're washing their hands and surfaces. When you're cooking those wonderful turkeys, but also making veggie dishes, you want to make sure you're keeping the raw meat separate from the produce. So there's different touch points for each of those clean, separate, cook, and chill that are especially important for large gatherings. Next slide. Story of Your Dinner is kind of like our go-to campaign for holiday events. And of course, holidays tend to be the ones that have the most people because we're getting together with our family and friends. So when you go to that webpage for Story of Your Dinner, there's resources specifically for educators. There's resources for home cooks too. And there is a Spanish version of that website that people can click over to. For the educators, we have a comms toolkit and sample social media post that you can do leading up to holiday events where people might be having large gatherings. And then on the home cook side, we have lots and lots of resources over there. We have videos, we have recipes. I do want to call out just a couple really quick that are especially important for large gatherings. Buffets and parties, we have a flyer for that gives information like how to keep hot foods hot and cold foods cold, remembering to use warming trays or crock pots while you have that food out for a big group. using smaller dishes for the cold food. You can have multiple smaller dishes and then trade them out in the fridge, have one out at a time, or put them in bowls of ice. So it has tips like that on that flyer. There's a frozen food tips flyer. Of course, when you have to cook a lot of food for a lot of people, you want to look for ways to do things faster. So you might be using frozen food. So that flyer talks about the importance of following the package instructions when you're preparing frozen foods. There's also our roast turkey recipe is on that page. And that recipe, I'll talk about this a little more in a minute, but it has safe handling steps already in the recipe, reminders on washing hands, on the correct internal temperature to cook it to. There's a hot chocolate cookies recipe there too. So check out that page. Next slide, please. Okay, hand washing. I'm just gonna go really quick, but of course, hand washing is important when you have a big group. It's always important. We do have a page that's just full of all the hand washing resources. One tip I might have, sometimes large gatherings are being hosted at like community centers or churches. So there's flyers like this Clean Hands, Healthy Home one. You could print those out and have people put them in their bathrooms just as a reminder that we should be washing our hands and the steps to take to do that. Next slide. Food safety myth busters. This is one of my favorite tools that we have. Is the Mythbusters series. And these are designed so you can share them online, but you could also download and print them and post them like in a kitchen, again, at like a community center or a church that might host large gatherings often. There's about 30 of them available. They cover the topics that Sharon and Meredith talked about, flour, baking and flour, meat and poultry, some that are particularly relevant for large gatherings under the fridge and freezer section. There's a Mythbusters on safely thawing food. So if you're making turkey, that might be a good one to share. There's one on disposing perishable food that's been left out all day, which of course, if you're having a party, it's easy to forget and leave that food out. And there's some microwave instructions too, under the, I think the meat and poultry category. So one of those tips is not to skip the standby time when you're cooking things in the microwave. That's an important part of the process, the cooking process. Next slide. Okay, safe produce. So when you're preparing for large gatherings, it's typically an event that doesn't happen all the time, like Christmas or Thanksgiving. So you might be preparing with produce that you're not used to handling. So these resources are good reminders on how to handle produce safely, make sure you're rinsing that produce, keeping it separate from raw meat. And there's lots of different types of resources within that campaign. There's flyers and brochures that could be printed out, posted, or handed out, social media content that you can share leading up to events that might have big groups of people getting together, like the holidays that are coming up. Next slide. Okay, safe poultry handling. Of course, chicken and turkey are popular choices around Thanksgiving, but another like large gathering they could be used at, I'm thinking like people eat a lot of wings at a Super Bowl party. That's also a large event. So we have lots of poultry handling resources. Don't Wing It, the one on the top there, focuses particularly on reducing the risk of salmonella and campylobacter. So it has a really great flyer on the science behind poultry handling messages. So if you're getting questions from people about why do I do this way, why do I do it that way, that's a good one to share. There are email templates and blog posts in there. So if you wanted to send out an email before Thanksgiving or write up a blog before the Super Bowl, like I mentioned, you can do that and have info about safe poultry handling. It has stuff for grocery stores too. So there's artwork and a circular ad that can be shared at grocery stores. And then Don't Wash Your Chicken is a campaign that has 4 animated videos that talk about the risk around rinsing your chicken. So it explains what the risk is in rinsing poultry, what the steps are that a poultry product goes through, that chicken goes through from the farm to your table, how it's processed, if people have questions about that, and about the goo that's on chicken, that protein and water, and what another way to take that off without rinsing it and introducing that risk. And that campaign also has social media messages and graphics that can be shared online in addition to the videos. Next slide. I mentioned safe recipes. A minute ago, I said we had a roast turkey recipe that has safety steps included. If you have your own recipes that you like to share for big events and holidays, because we usually have different recipes for those things. We're usually cooking for a lot of people, so we have to kind of change what we're making. You can use the safe recipe style guide to take your recipes and add in the food safety steps. It is research-based. Studies have shown that putting those steps in increases food safety behavior, and it's really easy. You just go to the guide and it has the language ready to go, and you can put it in where it makes sense in the recipes. There's a step in there about marinade that might be important, reminding people not to reuse marinade that's been used on raw foods. There's some steps around cross-contamination, which can be a big thing at large gatherings when you're cooking lots of different things at the same time. You've got your side dishes and your protein and your desserts kind of all going at once. So that's a great resource. Next slide. If you want recipes that are already ready to go, they have the safe recipe steps in them. We have that on the website. I mentioned the roast turkey recipe, but there's also some really fun ones in there. Like there's a apple turkey. So it's like an apple that you make look like a turkey, and a mousy cheese ball. Those are especially fun with kids if you want to get them involved in cooking for the holidays. There's several side dishes and desserts, lots of Brussels sprouts, which I love. There's a cast iron pumpkin bread and a healthier version of a pumpkin bread. So you can check those out. And I'll just say, if you have a recipe that's good for large gatherings, feel free to share it in the chat now or send it to us, because we always want to add to our database of safe recipes. I think I have one more slide here. Last resource that you might want to share for people planning large events is Prep Yourself. So when you're making a meal for a large group, it's a lot of work, and more people are opting to do things that can kind of lighten the load, let them spend more time with their family. So they might be ordering meal kits to cut down on preparation time. They might be having their groceries delivered so they can avoid the crowds at the store, or they might even skip the cooking altogether and have takeout delivered. So Prep Yourself is a resource that goes over the food safety steps that you need to remember when you're having food delivered. So making sure someone's home when the food is delivered, so your perishable items aren't like left on your porch for too long. Making sure that meat goes right into the fridge. It doesn't get into the danger zone. It talks about washing surfaces and hands, cooking foods to the right internal temperature, like if you're having a meal kit delivered. And it has info on what to do if you think a family member might have symptoms of a foodborne illness. So that campaign has print materials you can download and share. It has social media content, digital ads, lots of resources there around Prep Yourself. I think that's it for me. I want to make sure we have time for a couple of questions.
Thank you, Katie. Lots of goodies for everyone. So yeah, we have quite a few questions coming through. I see Meredith was busy in the chat. And so for those of you who are watching this later, we'll try to collate some of those questions and get those answered. But let's see here. Let's maybe start with Sharon. A question for you about flour. What is the reason to store flour outside of the bag in a separate container?
That's especially so that you will measure it accurately. That would be my primary reason for that. People who measure right out of the bag, there's a couple of things. There's a food safety issue too. I mean, you're putting your whole hand down in there. You're packing the flour into the cup rather than spooning it in. Some people keep an actual tool down in that in the bag with the flour, and that's not necessarily a good food safety thing either. So putting the flour in a separate sealable container that's been through food, through a dishwasher or whatever, cleaned thoroughly, is a great way to store the flour, keep the moisture out, and then also to measure more accurately, because you're more likely to fluff the flour into the cup, level it off, etc., than you are if it's in a bag. The less you dig into the flour bag, the less you're likely to introduce bacteria as well.
Yeah. Anything to do to limit multiple points of
Yeah.
cross contamination.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Sharon. Meredith, a question came up about brining. I think this is a popular question that we get at this time of year as well. So perhaps for the group, maybe you could share a little bit about food safety steps around brining.
Sure. Yep. So the question was specifically addressing a recipe that calls for a 4-day brine. It's usually we recommend after thawing or after buying a fresh turkey, to use cook it or refreeze if you've thawed in the refrigerator, but to cook it within 1 to 2 days, just to make sure you're using it before it might start to spoil. The colder it's kept, the longer it'll last. So, oftentimes if people thaw their turkey too early, we'll suggest wrapping it in, wet kitchen towels to help, and put it to the back of the fridge just to keep it as cold as possible to help extend that number of days. So it kind of goes along with brining as well. Once it's thawed or once you purchase it and you put it in a brine, it's safest to use it within that 1 to 2 day time frame. Again, just to make sure you're using it before it may start to spoil. But if you can keep it very, very, very cold, you might be able to get to that 4 days that the brine suggests, or that the recipe suggests, but we would still suggest to try and keep it to 2 days maximum.
Yeah. There are so many different recipes for these holiday meals. It's so fun to see what people come up with. I learned a lot of things just from these questions. Like, oh, people do that.
And there's dry brining, wet brining. There's a whole bunch of different brine situations. So we actually have a really great fact sheet about poultry basting, marinating, and brining. So I've put that link in the Q&A thing if anybody wants to take a peek.
Awesome. Thank you. Kind of going back to flour here, Sharon, and hopefully they had a question around someone submitted a question around the percentage of those who eat raw flour and related to illness. And I don't know if you're able to speak to the illness rates related to flour consumption.
Boy, I really don't have all the latest data on that, but I will say that flour recalls continue. And you can certainly find a good record of that within the government's website, which is really important to be able to do. I mentioned keeping your label from your flour. If you do as I've asked, to store your flour in a food safe container rather than in the bag, you still should keep the piece of the bag that tells you what the lot number is. And as far as food illness based on flour, 1% is way higher than what the actual incidence is. And Meredith, maybe you have that right at your fingertips, but how do you know where your E. coli or your salmonella came from with raw dough or meat that was undercooked? And, I don't consider myself a professional to answer that question.
No, fair enough.
Once you have it diagnosed, they can tell you where it came from.
Yeah, no,
But
fair enough. And I did put you on the spot a little with that one, Sharon. I think perhaps Katie, maybe you were able to dig up some research. I believe the FDA, there was a 2019 study the FDA did. Maybe Katie, did you have something?
Not off the top of my head, but we could look that up and maybe include it in a follow-up email if we can find any information about
Yeah.
that rate. Yeah.
There is some attribution rates. I just can't recall off the top of my head. So we'll make sure you all get that.
Yeah, I would be very, very interested in what you come up with. I think that the other piece of it that I really want to highlight, and you probably are out of time, but if there's a flour recall, do not keep that flour.
Mm.
And that's another good reason, if you're interested in environmental concerns, is that you cook flour, bake it thoroughly so that you don't have to have any illness from it. But there would be no flour recalls if everyone thoroughly baked and cooked their product. We don't get sick because we ate the baked product. We get sick because we ate the raw product. That leads to the flour recall. And the flour recall leads to total landfill of thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of food products. So, I mean, all of that is something that also just raises my antenna as a food educator, and that I don't want people to get sick, but I don't want to landfill ingredients either.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, food waste and food safety
They go hand
sometimes
in
talked
hand.
about as, yeah, they go hand in
They
hand.
go
Yeah,
hand in
yeah.
hand.
We have to figure this out. Well, I have one last question. This came up, this was asked by a couple of people in a different ways here. And perhaps I'll ask it of both you, Sharon, and Meredith as our closing star here for us. So a couple of people asked the question, how do you combat or respond to that question of I never get sick? When you're giving someone food safety guidance and they respond with, well, I've been eating raw batter my whole life, I never get sick. Or this also came up during your presentation, Meredith. Someone asked this question as well. How would you both address that question?
Do you want to go first, or shall I, Meredith?
You can go first if you want.
Okay. Well, there's a first time for everything.
Mm.
And just at my age, I would say, how do you know when you got sick from what you didn't properly handle? I will say that too. People get, oh, I have a bug, I don't feel well, but how do they know where that came from? They could look back and say, oh, I didn't wash my hands before I've been out handling who knows what, and then I went in and ate a snack and I never washed my hands. I mean, there's so many factors that go with that. And people are risk takers. Some are and some aren't. And those risk takers are the ones that are most challenging to us, because they would rather eat that cookie dough and be at risk than be told that they can't. And there's lots of them online. So how do I respond? I just say, well, you don't know why you got sick, maybe, or maybe you haven't yet. But this time, if you are sick, you will be you could be so sick, it would make me sad to think of. And I will just throw out there, I mean, you only have to know one family that's lost a child or a loved one to E. coli, and you don't ever want to hear about it again. And that's me. I don't ever want to see it happen again. So I'll do my best. I do my best.
Thank you, Sharon. Meredith, what would you say?
Totally agree with what Sharon says. It's when talking to people on the meat and poultry hotline or just talking to loved ones in general, it's very much a foodborne illness is finicky. It can happen or it might not happen. It's not a guarantee that you eat something raw, or that's undercooked and you're going to get sick, but there is the chance that it could happen. And there's a chance that it could be really bad. Again, it could happen or it couldn't happen. Or it's also one of those things where the symptoms have such a range. It could be something as simple as some basic tummy cramps, or, going to the bathroom, or it could result in hospitalization and death. And so it's just a matter of what level of risk you would like to take. And just because you haven't gotten sick in the past doesn't mean it can't happen. And then also, if you're preparing food for other people, you have people in your life that are at-risk individuals that might have a much harder time if they're exposed to these types of bacteria than you and your body would. So putting it in that kind of frame of reference, like Sharon said, there's a first time for everything. It could happen. And, it's just a matter of if you want to take that risk or not, but also being mindful about if you're preparing food for other people, they might not have the same immune system that you do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank you both wholeheartedly for staying on. I want to thank those who have stayed on with us. Just like in large gatherings, things get a little wild. We have some great information to share, lots of good stuff to share. I think Meredith and Sharon and Katie and myself are happy to take any questions via email, and we'll do our best to share resources out with additional links. So just to close us out here really quickly, we will send out information on your CEUs. You will get that. If you do not, please let us know. Obviously, stay connected with us, with the partnership, to continue to get updates about resources and events like this. And we want to thank our community connectors for making this event possible and to be able to offer it for free to you all. So thank you. And also our contributing partners that support our work year round. And thank you for joining us. I hope you all have a lovely day whenever you're watching this, and take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mhm.